Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most profound, and let's be honest, most challenging texts on suffering ever written, the divine speeches from the book of Job.
So you have this righteous man, Job. He's lost everything, his wealth, his health, his children. And he doesn't just ask why. No, he does something much, much bolder. He essentially demands a formal legal trial, with God himself on the defendant's stand.
To really get how audacious this demand is, you first have to understand the entire worldview that he's calling into question. See, Job's friends are absolutely convinced he must be guilty of some awful hidden sin. It's the only way his suffering makes any sense in their neat and tidy world. But Job knows he's a good person, and so from his pile of ashes, he declares that this whole system, it's broken.
Okay, so let's get into the core conflict here. You basically got two competing worldviews clashing. There's the human perspective, right? The one Job and his friends share, where justice is this straightforward cause and effect system. But then, there's the divine response that's about to come from a whirlwind, which presents a universe that operates on a scale that is just so much grander and more complex.
So when God finally does respond, it's not the legal defense Job was braced for. He shows up in a whirlwind, and in what's been called a hurricane force assault on Job's perspective, he completely flips the script. The one who was supposed to be the defendant is now the one asking the questions. Now, from inside this whirlwind, God doesn't start by talking about Job's suffering at all. Instead, he just completely reframes the scale of the entire conversation. He zooms the camera way, way out. God's very first words aren't an answer. They're a direct challenge. He says the core problem isn't injustice, but human ignorance, words without knowledge. He's basically saying that human chatter is just obscuring the real, divine design of the cosmos.
And with that, the interrogation begins. This first question is just designed to hit Job with his own limitations. It confronts him with the simple fact that he is a total latecomer to a cosmic project that began long, long before he ever even existed.
And the questions keep coming, moving from the dawn of creation to the daily workings of the universe. God grills Job on astronomy, on meteorology, these massive, intricate systems that Job sees every day but has absolutely zero control over.
You know, each one of these questions is like a rhetorical hammer blow. They aren't meant for Job to actually answer. They're designed to systematically expose this vast, unbridgeable gap in knowledge and power between the creator and the creature. And this is really important to understand. This isn't about kicking a guy when he's down. It's a profound act of reorientation. God is dismantling Job's human-centered worldview, showing him that, hey, the universe was not actually built with you as its main reference point. This is a pretty radical idea, especially for the ancient world. God talks about making it rain in a desert where no one even lives. This suggests that nature has its own value to God, completely separate from how useful it is to humanity. The world doesn't just exist for us.
So after this tour of the whole cosmos, the whirlwind zooms in on the animal kingdom. And God doesn't point to the docile sheep or the loyal dog. No, he focuses on creatures that are untamable, dangerous, or just plain weird.
God points to all these animals that exist completely outside of human control. The lion, the raven, the mountain goat, the wild ox, they all live and thrive based on a divine logic, not a human one.
And next, God presents the very curious case of the ostrich. This bird is a living paradox that seems to defy all human logic. By our standards, it's a terrible parent and it's terribly designed for flight, but at the same time, it can outrun a warhorse.
The text is really explicit here. The ostrich's bizarre, seemingly flawed nature, well, it isn't an accident. It's not a mistake in creation. It is a deliberate, intentional design choice by God. And this really gets to the core theme of the whole speech. What looks like a flaw or a mistake or even cruelty from our limited human perspective, well, it has a purpose and a glory all its own inside God's much grander, more complex design. So after this overwhelming tour of creation, from the stars all the way down to the strange birds in the desert, God introduces his final and his most powerful exhibit. He points to this creature called Behemoth. Now, its exact identity is still debated. Was it a hippo, a dinosaur, some kind of mythological beast? But honestly, what it was doesn't really matter. Its theological point is crystal clear no matter what. By pointing to this massive, powerful creature, God is making a very clear point to the man who wanted to sue him. The message is,
If you can't even control this one animal I made, how could you possibly think you can pass judgment on the one who created and controls it all?
And then finally, God pauses the whirlwind of questions. He turns the floor back over to Job, the man who wanted to put him on trial, and demands a response.
And just like that, Job's entire legal case just dissolves. Faced with the sheer, untamable scale of reality, his only response is silence. This isn't a confession of sin, by the way. It's a profound admission of his own limitations, his own smallness.
So, ultimately, Job's transformation doesn't come because he got an explanation for his suffering. It comes from having an experience of God's majesty. He's vindicated, not for his perfect piety, but for his raw, grappling honesty in the face of his overwhelming mystery.
The divine speeches in Job leave us with this really powerful thought. What if the right response to life's deepest, most painful mysteries isn't a demand for a neat explanation, but a humble, awe-filled silence in the presence of the divine?